Awesome. Hi, guys. Yeah. So, my name is Cedar Wright, and professional climber, filmmaker, and now the founder and director of the Dirtbag Fund, which I'll kind of tell you about later. But it's a little bit of an origin story of how I got to this place. And it all starts here in this school bus where I was conceived. That's actually the school bus that I spent the first couple of my years of my life living that school bus with my hippie parents, raising me up right. They named me Cedar and my sister Willow, and we, kind of grew up in the Sierras. And at the time, I didn't. Who knows where I was going to end up? But I, was getting publicity and making a name for myself at an early age. You can see Cedar Wright decided things looked so fun, he wanted to get in the monkey cage. Yeah, and I grew up in the Sierras, in the outdoors. But hadn't been introduced to rock climbing yet. Awkward young kid.
Boys.
Yeah, exactly. Saved by the Bell. But honestly, I kind of struggled through these teenage years a little bit. I didn't really have a strong sense of purpose. My mom had really instilled in me the importance of storytelling and creative writing. She would make me write every day during the summer. I had to write at least one page, but I was lost, honestly. I just didn't have anything that really gave me a spark or gave me a direction. And I went off to college at Humboldt, and I one day was just out at the beach smoking weed, and I saw this. I saw these guys rock climbing, and I thought it looked so interesting. And I found someone, a roommate, who was able to take me out and take me on my first rock climb. And basically with rock climbing, it's you get chalk bag, shoes, harness, that's where it starts, right? And you have the tools to go out and do this thing. And so while I was going to school, I met some really important people who took me out for my first climbs. My first climb was a ropeless climb, and I was shaking my way up it. If I was gonna fall, I was gonna die. And my buddy Sean Leary, who you'll see here in a minute, was the guy who introduced me to climbing, and he told me about this mythical place called Yosemite Valley, where all of these climbers basically lived and climbed the biggest, most impressive walls in the world. And you could just live in a cave, and you could collect cans, or you could go over to the pizza area and just grab scraps of pizza, and you could basically live on nothing and climb all the time, And I was like, well, that sounds like paradise. I'm gonna move there. And so I graduated from college with a bachelor's in creative writing, and I moved into my Toyota Camry, and I took it to Yosemite Valley. And my parents were like, "You're gonna do what?" And I basically just got by on next to nothing for many, many years in Yosemite Valley while I just obsessed over rock climbing and perfected the craft. And this is just an example of a first ascent I did in Yosemite. The first person to climb something is a first ascent. And I also at that time got on Yosemite Search and Rescue because I was just in the valley living in caves. I became someone who could get up anything, anywhere, right? I got really good at climbing. And so that was pretty valuable for the Park Service, because that meant I could go and I could rescue people, I could help people out. And so I got to fly all over Yosemite in helicopters and had all kinds of crazy wild rescues and some pretty gnarly experiences. And also just started to really be at a top level in the sport in Yosemite, and was setting speed records and just perfecting my craft and pushing the limits, and doing things that were where people were taking notice. And at the same time, at that time, right, to become a famous rock climber, meant maybe appearing in the mags, writing an article for the mags, or appearing in one of these VHS tapes that Kevin kind of talked about. So, it was just a completely different media landscape when I first came into the world of wanting to be a professional climber. And this is Dean Potter, who's an iconic guy who I met in Yosemite early on, and was one of the first kind of in our community of rock monkeys, we called ourselves, who was able to get some sponsors and start to make a living through climbing. I also met these guys, the Huber brothers, who were these professional climbers from Europe. And so it kind of planted this idea, of maybe someday I could, I could do this. I could turn this into something bigger. So I started writing articles for the magazines and just, pushing the limits of the sport in different ways, working with different photographers. And, I was getting a picture in a mag here or there, and then I wrote an article, and I just started to build a name for myself. And at the same time, I started to want to take these skills that I was developing and take them out into the world and start to explore. And so that, go on expedition. And this was my first expedition with this guy, Jason Singer-Smith. We went to Baffin Island, and we did the first grade 7, which is like the biggest, most gnarly committing big wall that you can do in a push, and nearly died up there, and barely survived the experience. Came back, God among men. But that was a pretty notable thing, and it was at this point I was like starting to, be a somewhat famous climber. People were wanting to come and film me, and I was also working it, and I got sponsored by the North Face. And this was one of the first like kind of
this one, the Cedar Wright, because it basically
videos.
When I first put it up, it's all about hanging from your feet upside down with a bat on crack, or bat in a crack. Basically upside down, wheel toeing out a roof for 35 feet.
So I found this actually, I was on search and rescue at the time, and we had a search going on for an Irish guy. We never found the Irish guy, but one day while I was searching, I looked across the river and I was like, I found this crack, and ended up doing the first ascent of this like wild off-width roof crack. And this became a thing, right? I was always looking to be the first, to do something new, to do something cool. And so when I did this, I told my friends who were these filmmakers, and they came out and filmed this. And this really kind of now, like people are getting these VHS tapes, and they're getting inspired by these things, and you're starting to, become like a known quantity in the climbing world. Yeah, but so in this specifically is the video that Kevin was talking about. This is the VHS tape that literally came in the mail. He probably filled out one of those little cutout things and sent it in, and then this tape comes in the mail. And this was my spot in what Masters of Stone it was called at the time. And it was very, very 90s. They like the soundtrack, everything about it is very, very funny. Sojourner's Tangent Universe, But yeah, so I got really into speed climbing, into climbing these rocks as fast as I possibly could.
High quality track climbing in the world. 600 vertical feet. These guys burn it off in a little more than 1 minute per pitch.
And the guy who's who's racing with me up the wall is the guy who introduced me to climbing really in Humboldt, who taught me about ropeless climbing, who mentored me and brought me into the community. And so, yeah, it was pretty cool to race up this iconic route in Yosemite and set a speed record, and then go back and pose down with this guy Eric Perlman, who made these Masters of Stone movies. And kind of like a bucket list to appear in one of these films for a rock climber of the day, because a lot of the people that I looked up to and the heroes in climbing had appeared in these movies, and now I was in one of them, and so it was a cool little thing for me, And then the soundtrack is just, yeah, it's just so classic, And it's funny to look back on this time, and I was I was about to kind of have my career right at this inflection point of the evolution of media, right? And I remember a buddy of mine a little later on after this was like, oh yeah, there's this new app, it's called Instagram. And I was like, oh cool, I take climbing photos and I make little videos. I could put them on this app, and little did I know that it was gonna no longer be about appearing in the mags or writing articles for mags. Really, it was gonna be about creating your own content. It was gonna be about sharing via social media. And so climbing really exploded and became a big sport right at the same time that media in climbing really evolved and changed. And luckily I was somewhat savvy posers. But yeah, and so, like this sort of stuff allowed me to have a profile. I got on the North Face climbing team, which is just the most elite climbing team that you can get on, and they would fund expeditions. And so I basically will kind of race through this, but you'll get an idea of just like the fact that I spent 20 years traveling the world. I don't know, does anyone here know who Jimmy Chin is? Yeah, okay, a lot of you have heard of Jimmy Chin, or you know who Alex Honnold is? Yeah, who became like free solo, it won an Academy Award. So a lot of you understand that like climbing kind of exploded onto the mainstream. Well, at the time, my buddy Jimmy was like just looking for a gig, and I was like, oh, you can come on this expedition with me, little buddy, and he took these incredible photos while we were out there in Africa, and he was just hustling, and at the time, Jimmy and I were both living in our cars, cruising around and climbing. And it was wild, wild to think that that this dirtbag buddy of mine would go on to get an Academy Award and become like one of the most iconic climbers and characters in the world, And so yeah, I got to just travel all over the place. I went to Patagonia, I went to Nepal, climbed like crazy like ice waterfalls, and just continue to perfect my skills. Like take those skills I'd learned in Yosemite and apply them to the bigger mountains. And like up the stakes, I went and I went to the Czech Republic and did like tower jumping, which was totally wild with all these crazy drunk Czech guys. This one guy, he did this big jump and literally broke his leg on the other side, and he was like, "Come on!" And I was like, and then I jumped and I didn't break my leg. Yeah, Australia, doing big first ascents. Slowly but surely working my way through the continents, and also all this time, like trying to do some hard ropeless climbing here and there. At some point, there was this new kid, China, and I was the first person to stand on top of that, like what an iconic experience, just raging my way around the world, fully funded by the North Face, like living the dream, from like living in caves in Yosemite and getting by on next to nothing, and having everybody be like, you're totally insane, to pulling it off somehow against all odds. And this is like what a crazy peak life experience to be the first person on top of this little piece of rock. It was absolutely surreal. And Czech Republic, this is Crimea actually. So formerly, it was Ukraine when I was there. And big first ascent, big whippers. The locals set up a 700-foot rope jump for me, which was pretty mellow. Yeah, you guys should. Yeah, next year Kevin's going to set up a 700-foot rope jump for you. I mean, it looks like I just like hit the trees. It's such a big jump, like wild experiences. And during this time, this guy, Renan Ozturk, who would go on to become one of the most iconic cinematographers in the outdoor world, created some films with Jimmy Chin early on, and had this like creative filmmaker's mind. He was one of the first guys to show me how to use Final Cut, so editing software, and showed me how to use cameras. I'd been in these films, and as a storyteller and writer, I started to be like, well, it's so cool that they get to tell these stories, and like, it's sort of like this extra dimension to storytelling, right? If not just like words and pictures, but the moving pictures and being able to organize all of this stuff in a way to tell a story. Renan and I went to Pakistan and Alaska and did these big first ascents. I was the first person to stand on top of this. Actually, if you go back, on the left there, you can see that crazy like cat ear looking thing. No one had ever stood on it, and that's like in the Himalaya, like kind of one of like my peak climbing experiences ever. We like camped halfway up the thing with no sleeping bags, froze our nuts off, and pulled it off, and stood on top of the unclimbed ear of the cat ear spire in the Himalaya, like for a climber, one of the most like prized things you can get, a first ascent, and a first ascent in the Himalaya. So really special. And then these guys, here's Renan and then the folks from Sender Films on a trip to Patagonia. And at this point, they were making a film about me, but at the same time, I was like, well, show me how you do this and show me how you do that. And this was when I really started to take a strong interest in filmmaking. And they made this film about our trip. But from there, I started to film other people, to film myself. It became really important to continue my career, to like have content to roll out. And so I was turning the camera on myself, turning the camera on other people. Oh, not without risks.
I just shit my pants.
Anyways, you can. It's worth
You have to
googling.
the name of that route.
Yeah. So the route was called Boogie Till You Puke, and then we renamed it Boogie Till You Poop after my buddy Jason shit his pants in the office, and we happened to document that. But yeah, being on the North Face team, at some point there was this young guy named Alex Honnold who was making a name for himself in Yosemite, and he's about 10 years younger than me. And I was like, oh yeah, this guy is like the perfect partner for the kind of stuff I want to do. And we did a lot of fun trips together, including a trip to the Czech Republic. But this was sort of like a turning point for me because we went and did all of the 14ers in California by bike. We came up with this crazy idea. We wanted to do a human-powered adventure close to home. And there's 14,000 foot peaks in California. We started at Mount Shasta, then we worked our way to the Sierras. And then we climbed them all by technical free solo routes. So pushing into the pretty difficult climbing without a rope, and then all of the approaches by bike. And Honnold is just an absolute friggin' beast, and it was pretty rugged to keep up, but I could and I did. Yeah, just free soloing at a high level. And the whole time I just basically had a camera and I just sort of filmed everything. I just filmed me, filmed him, and that, yeah. Yeah, it was kind of a rugged trip, yeah. And, but etched in my memory, it's one of my great adventures with a buddy. And the whole time I documented everything, and I ended up making this film that I called The Sufferfest. And this was my first film that actually toured with film festivals and things like that.
We haven't even really gotten lost in any of the mountains. We don't have a topo, we don't have any description, we don't have a map, but they have this nice little trail map. So we're gonna hike the trail, and then we're gonna go to the top. We'll sort of figure it out.
Sounds simple.
After that, we trail.
Might be on the wrong mountain. No, Graham, that's true.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive we climbed the right mountain.
On the wrong mountain.
It was not 14,000 foot. We were trying to do all the 14ers and we accidentally climbed a 13er.
In fact, we climbed the wrong thing.
Yeah, anyways, that film is a 30-minute film that toured with all these film festivals. And, at this point, Honnold wasn't this uber famous guy. He was starting to make a name for himself. But, he would go on to become a bigger deal. We did another Sufferfest trip, where we did Desert Towers. And at this point, I'd refined filmmaking. And this was the film where I released it, and it did really well. And I think this is the trailer for the film, actually.
So, start Sufferfest 2.
Here we are.
I mean, the thing about suffering is you don't really need to train to suffer. You just do it. And I think I'm getting better at it. It's feeling more and more better.
Yeah, this is one of the most beautiful places on Earth. It's unreal.
The terrain is so crazy that, you feel like a brontosaurus might go walking by or something. You're just whoa. It's the land before time type of stuff.
Climbing with Alex is always a pleasure, but it's always kind of painful.
I'm a fucking beast. What's that? Flying faster.
Alex makes me suffer.
He's a meticulous individual. I, on the other hand, am a complete junk show.
Every once in a while, climbing is easy enough or chalky enough. Cedar really excels.
I don't think we're going to suffer quite as much on this trip. I don't think it'll be that bad. No, I mean, it's definitely going to be bad.
Oh my god, his ass is ripped open. And I'm fall into a cactus.
It's so windy. It's snowing. Let's get out of here.
High wind, check. Horrible climbing, check. Basically, we just went to war.
We had a nice adventure up there. Oh yeah! Oh yeah! Oh yeah!
Oh no.
Yeah, this is not the acre I told you before.
Cedar thinks the title should be Desert Alpine. I think the title should be 34 pieces of choss and 5 horrendous life experiences.
You guys have something else, right?
So yeah, that's kind of like at that point I'd like, you know, kind of like I'd realized, oh, you don't have to make the whole film yourself. From Sufferfest 1 to Sufferfest 2, it was like point the camera at yourself to like, oh, hire a crew and like, you know, work with a team and like take more of a director's and producer's role in my films. And you know, Han and I went on to go to Africa and did a crazy trip there, and I like produced a film for the North Face. And at this point, it was really like becoming a career, you know, and it was less about me just filming, but also, you know, hiring people and building something. And during this Africa trip, this was my first ascent.
Go get it, Cedar. Come on, Cedar. Get out here. Yeah, dude. Come on. Yeah, come on. Fight it.
Cedar's climbing style is definitely, he doesn't overthink it, you know?
Fight. Come on.
Super nice.
Yeah. Throw it up there. Come on, dude. Come on, Cedar. That's it.
And that, you know, that feeling is the best feeling in the world when you battle to the, you know, I mean, anything in life, right? When you don't know if you're going to pull it off, when you work really hard, when you're battling right at the edge, and then, you know, that's the best feeling in the world. And climbing can give you that. It can also beat you down like no other sport. Yeah, you know, and it was like, I did this other North Face trip to Europe, and we did like the biggest unclimbed wall in Europe in this total Sufferfest. There was like birds that would puke on you as you climb past them, called fulmars. This is just a quick bird encounter here. Yeah, that's like bird just sprayed puke right in my face. Yeah, wild experience with legendary climbers. And yeah, at that point I realized I had like climbed a big first ascent on 6 continents. But you know, the most kind of elusive and difficult to get to, most expensive continent, Antarctica, was still, you know, I just kept proposing expeditions, and the North Face kept saying no, until I reached out to Conrad Anker, who's another iconic climber on the team, and he was like, yeah, I'll like see what I can do. He had been to Queen Maudlin many years before, and that really had inspired me to go to this place in Antarctica where these big, big walls are. And yeah, we pulled some strings and we made it happen. And Jimmy Chin came along, and Honnold was my partner for all this. And he and I, while Conrad and Jimmy did a big wall style first ascent, Alex and I just ran around alpine style, and we climbed pretty much every formation in the range in like a 3-week period, just like in a speed climbing, just like very risky, like a mix of free soloing and of alpine style climbing with this buddy that now, you know, I've just been lucky to travel the world with. And this was definitely one of the peak experiences of my life, going to Antarctica and doing all these amazing first ascents with Honnold, and also having the privilege of hiring like a really elite team of filmmakers and getting to direct and produce a film called Queen Maudlin about this experience. And yeah, it'll just forever etched in my psyche as like just an outrageous experience. I think we did 13 first ascents in 3 weeks. Yeah, some of them without a rope. We were just, you know, like this one here. And yeah, absolutely wild. There was also a team of ladies. We took them up one summit together. So it was 6 North Face climbers in Queen Maudlin. And yeah, fashion. And yeah, just basking it all in. This was our team. You know, in some ways, this was like, I feel like I'd kind of done it at this point in climbing. This is like actually no one's seen this before. This is a recut of like the peak.
The guiding principle of my climbing is just to do the hard thing. Like even if I don't want to, I'll just do the thing that I feel like I'm supposed to do.
Tomorrow's, yeah, it's one of the taller mountains here, and we're going for another unclimbed line, so that's always adds like an element of uncertainty. It looks steep, it looks run out, it looks horrible, so it should be a good time.
I think the thing that has made the climbing the scariest for us here is how bad the rock is. I feel okay just like holding on to holds very gently and sort of climbing like a salamander here, so like worming my way over the wall, but not ever pulling on things too hard.
So you have to be very careful. You can easily rip something off the wall and just like take some horrendous death whip, or if you're gonna climb here, you have to be on your shit. If you tuck it up. There's like no real rescue here. Okay. I thought we'd be fucked. Almost like just irrepressible confidence. He thinks this looks butt light. Like we're on a different part of the mountain than what we've climbed on before. I think it looks hard. All right, that's me. 1 second, Arnold. We got to chill for a second. Stop. We get you. He's efficient. We get shit done quick. Stop. But it's like, God, sometimes I'm just like, can we just chill 3 minutes? And the joys of climbing 25-pound bag.
This was our last climb, and I'd had it. I was like, I don't want to die here in Antarctica. So right now we're both climbing simultaneously with almost no protection between us.
What was the temperature?
Well below zero, freezing.
Because he yarded us 1,000 feet.
So you can see we're in the sun right now. So what happened in this situation was it went into the shade, and you'll see it kind of got dire.
Pretty horrible.
Hey, Cedar, can you sign on for that first ledge? The rope guy's really bad.
Oh, it's so cold. We're sadly in the shade. My feet feel like ice block after sitting here for 3 minutes. I was on a vision quest up there. Went really slow. Really scary face climbing. I am so cold. It's hard to put into words how freaking cold I am.
I don't know. It's really rotten. Really cold and hard to protect. Just I'm really scared. Give me a minute.
My fingers and toes are totally numb. Cedar's totally numb. We're both shaking. And we're like, oh no, we need to find a way to the top as fast as possible. All coming apart.
Yeah, I'm like 20 feet or 30 feet away. I'm just like gripped under the dome and cold.
You know when you can hear the fear in Alex Honnold's voice? That you're a little too close to the edge.
I think this is gonna work. Try to gain on me a bit.
You know, I thought I hadn't felt my feet in a long time. Like, I sure wish I could.
This is so next level. Like, this is crazy. I'm off the way! Yeah, that was like one of the most fucked up things in my life, I think. I was like, oh my god. That was crazy. It's maybe the most messed up route maybe in my life. It's one of the scariest things in my life.
I climbed a lot of Chos, and that was the scariest, proudest Chos lead I've ever. So I don't like it. I'm deeply traumatized just following that bitch. It was like hard. Just climbing.
I need to give that route the old 10D.
10D.
All road 10D.
Scarier than Freerider?
Yeah.
Scarier.
Very true. Each hold is like, feels like a time bomb.
Each fold was a time bomb.
Well, I thought I was gonna have to take our emergency jump on the heat.
Anyways, yeah, I would go on from there to, also make some pretty successful films, not about me, but about my friends. And yeah, it gave me a career. It allowed me to live a life here in Boulder that I'm extremely grateful for. After that Antarctica trip, I really started to, go on a side quest, basically, and got really obsessed with the sport of paragliding. And, slowly but surely went from being a noob in the sport to kind of going through that same process I had with climbing of, learning the intricacies to really being able to excel in the sport and set records and win competitions. And it's been this incredible kind of 10-year side quest into paragliding. And actually did this North Face trip with my friend Matt Siegel, where we went and climbed Pico de Orizaba, and we flew off the highest peak in Mexico, which was just a totally outrageous experience. And yeah, made a little film about it. Like, I think just to get through this, we could skip this one probably, but
And then
you get the idea. We flew.
Kenzie and I pulled our paragliders up in the air. We turned around and we flew off of Pico de Orizaba.
Yeah, we flew off Pico de Orizaba. I went to Pakistan and flew in the Himalayas, where I'd done some of those big first ascents earlier in my life. This was definitely one of the most outrageous, probably most dangerous things I've ever done, flying over these massive mountains in the Himalaya. We're just like catching air currents, thermals. We're climbing up, and you can travel like 200 kilometers over the mountains. Had some really wild experiences, just, landing in some random Pakistani village, and then, hitchhiking, getting in with locals, making my way back. Yeah, it was just an absolutely outrageous experience. I continue to just really crave and need those peak experiences and love to push the risk. But then, also I've built this amazing family with my wife, Melissa, and I've been very lucky and blessed, and that initial commitment to the dirtbag lifestyle has led me to, a very not dirtbag lifestyle of living in a beautiful home with a beautiful wife and beautiful dogs, and just having these rad adventures with this incredible woman, and sharing this love for climbing, and then also paragliding together. Yeah, it's been such an amazing journey, and taking the little legends out flying. But then to get to kind of the origin story of the Dirtbag Fund, about 4 years ago, I broke and dislocated my neck and was laying on the ground. Just had been messing around, had a friend on my shoulders and fell and broke and dislocated just a stupid accident. But was laying on the ground, couldn't move my legs, and for a hot second thought I was going to be a quadriplegic, and had a pretty bad spinal cord injury, and it was a year of recovery. And during that time, I thought about how lucky I was, and to be alive and to not be paralyzed, and also just what an amazing career I'd had. I was looking back on this incredible experience of life, and I was also looking to the next generation of climbers and thinking about how I could maybe contribute. And I came up with this idea of the Dirtbag Fund. Also, in the last year, my wife had a serious paragliding accident, and we've been down in Denver for the last 6 months. She was in a wheelchair, and then in the last 6 months, she's been learning to walk again, and it's been a pretty heavy and intense thing. And when things like this happen to you in your life, it kind of puts things in perspective. And this is where we're at right now. I'm working hard to get my wife back on her feet. So basically, looking back on this incredible career and these amazing peak experiences, and in the last couple years, some really tough experiences, but still just really grateful for this life, I came up with this idea of the Dirtbag Fund. And it started out the first year after I broke my neck. Basically, I had gotten some influencer money, and I was just looking at this next generation of climbers and how the landscape's changed and how much tougher it is to make a name for yourself, how much just different it is, and I realized it'd be cool to kind of shout out some of the dirtbags who are doing cool stuff. I'm gonna take this influencer money, I'm just gonna give it away. I looked at making a nonprofit, but at the start it was gonna take a year to get the nonprofit up and running. I was like, screw it, I'm just gonna give the money away and we'll figure this out later. And so it started out as just giving away some cash to dirtbags, young climbers. I made a little application, they all emailed me, and I found some cool stories. And I was like, hey, would you like some mentoring, maybe with filmmaking, or would you like to, maybe tell your story through writing? And it started out like that. And then that really resonated with a lot of people. And I was able to get a couple of angel investors. And so in the last few years, I've been able to give out about $20,000 a year to different dirtbags, and then it kind of comes with some career development. With some people, it's just mentoring or filmmaking kind of help, or with others, it could be like strategizing, like how can I turn this like dirtbag lifestyle into a career? And for some, it's just like you need help. You know, your van's broken down and you're stuck on the side of the road, and I'm just going to fix it. You know, and there's no strings attached. And yeah, so it's a very loose kind of a program, but we have turned it into a nonprofit. I am the director, and then we have a board, including Honnold. And every year we look at a bunch of different dirtbag applications, and then we try to, like, you know, select a group that really of people that are pushing the limits of climbing, that are contributing to the culture of climbing. And then I get on the phone with them and I brainstorm about how, you know, what do you want to do? How can we tell your story? You know, and we're starting to have like release some films through the Dirtbag Fund, and I'm really trying to turn it into a little bit of a nonprofit media company where we share people's stories and where we empower the next generation of climbers and give them some of those opportunities that I was so lucky to have. And so that's the Dirtbag Fund. And it's just, you know, it's very grassroots. None of us are getting paid. Every single dollar goes right to dirtbags or to the production of, you know, films about the dirtbags. And it's something that that's very close to my heart. It's become kind of where I'm putting most of my energy right now. And yeah, it's something that makes me very proud. And I really appreciate your guys' time. And if you want to donate to the Dirtbag Fund, by all means. Yeah, and then also, you know, I'm very accessible. So if you guys ever, want to get any tips on, you know, maybe how to quit your corporate jobs and move into a cave, I'm happy to help you with that. And yeah, I really appreciate your guys' time, and I hope that you found that entertaining or illuminating. And it's been a wild journey riding that wave of like technology and seeing the way that things have evolved. What it means to have a climbing career has changed so much. The advent of climbing gyms, Honnold coming on the scene and getting an Academy Award for free solo. You know, I've seen climbing go like 100x, and it's been really wild to ride that inflection point and have a career for which I'm very grateful. And so, yeah, it's just something interesting to think about how storytelling and technology evolves over time, and how I personally was able to ride that wave. And then I'm sure you guys are all thinking about these things: how you ride these waves, how you adapt as the times change. And then at some point, you know, what can you do to give back and contribute? I think is a question worth asking yourself. And that's the question I asked myself, and I came up with the Dirtbag Fund. So thank you very much. And yeah.
We'll do some questions if you guys have some, but there's one thing I didn't tell you about this event, which is every event I do, I want to support a cause. I want to kind of give back actively, and chose the Dirtbag Fund this time, and Cedar was gracious enough to come do this talk. So after the event, there's going to be an ask, just so you're on, be warned, that I'm going to match contributions from you guys, and hopefully we can make a really nice contribution to the Dirtbag Fund. The reason I think it's super important is the dirtbag lifestyle, especially the one that Cedar lived back in the day in the cave, is sort of dying, but it's important to keep that torch burning, because most of us in this room are not going to go live in a cave at this point in our lives, but those are the people on the fringes are the ones that I draw inspiration from. Like, yeah, I'm not going to go live in a cave, but can I maybe like work a little less and spend a little bit more time outside? And so, you know, it's important to have those people out there who are living at the extremes. And as Cedar said, the thing about dirtbags, they're really good at making money stretch a long way. Like $1,000 is like months for a proper dirtbag to be able to.
I had this one dirtbag. I gave him early on, because at the start it was just $1,000, and I gave him $1,000, and it was, I mean, it changed his life in these amazing ways. And actually, he ended up like falling on this choss climb and perforating his butthole, and he used the money to sew his butthole back together again. So, which is totally on brand for the Dirtbag Fund. So you never know what your money could go to.
The other thing I want to mention, you said something before this talk that really hit home. Is like, you know, there's a lot of debate, especially if you're on Twitter, about like following your passion versus doing what makes money. You can probably guess which end I fall on. But one thing that doesn't come out, because it looks like Cedar had this amazing life, and he just sort of rambled through these climbing destinations and had a bunch of fun. But what you don't see is the work behind the scenes. So Cedar, you were saying before this, like, these films, this storytelling, behind every film is thousands of hours of work. So if you're going to pursue a craft, you also have to do the work. And it turns out if you do that, things tend to work out. Like it might take decades or whatever. And that's what's so inspiring about, for me in particular, about Cedar and Nellie, which is they ended up having this incredible life with, guess what, lots of money too, but not because that's what they were pursuing purpose, but they just did the work. And if you do that, serendipity happens. You know, probably most of the things that happen in your life you couldn't have predicted.
No, it was all very, very and continues to be pretty random and exciting. And, you know, life is an adventure no matter how much you try to make it a structured and, you know, predictable thing. And so I've just like lived on the extreme of that and been rewarded for sure, you know.
Super inspiring.
Also been beat down hard by it, you know, but that's life, you know.
Yeah, I mean, on the beatdown side, personal connection to the story about, so I met Cedar through his wife Nellie. I climbed with Nellie, and I was supposed to climb with Nellie on a Monday. We were going to go to Shanahan Crag, and I get a call from another of our mutual friends, Jamie, and said, Nellie has had a bad accident. And it obviously affected a lot of the climbing community in a pretty serious way. But just seeing her and the way she's reacted to this being paralyzed, basically, has been super inspiring for me. Nellie has said, like, that's my new project.
Yeah.
And
It's
not
incredible.
easy. Yeah, it's incredible.
It's incredible, like how hard she's working and how hard it is, you know. And
There's a dark side to some of this stuff, and you know,
Absolutely.
we all try to avoid it. And I was telling John at my house a couple days ago, it's like, I do the safe kind of climbing. Like, I just, you know, I'm not, the Antarctica stuff just blows my mind. But there is a degree of risk, and there's a degree of risk in anything. And I think the question you have to ask is, like, if the worst happens, would it all have been worth it? And I haven't asked Nellie this question, but, you know, in my case, I do things, I always think about that consciously, like, if something happened, that's the decision framework I use, and the answer is absolutely yes for me. Like, climbing in particular has changed my life enough, it's a big enough part of my life that it's worth it. That's a really important question to ask.
Well, and
Sorry.
also, you know, I mean, I broke my neck in my living room after years of. So it's like, you know, there's that, you know, I mean, but seriously, right? It's like, you know, you can wring your hands over, you know, taking risks, and it could any type of risk, right? It could be like a financial risk. Maybe you want to start a new business. You want to, you know, you're like, I'm sick of this job. I want to do something new, and that's scary and that's a risk, you know. But you know, you could also be paralyzed. So, you know, like maybe it's not as big of a risk as you thought, you know. And it's also, you know, life is pretty boring without throwing caution to the wind a little bit, you know. And you don't have to go to Antarctica and like climb a big wall or like fly over a peak in the Himalayas, you know. But
Questions? Yeah.
How has your risk-taking changed as you've gotten older?
how is my less than some people my age, but it's definitely changed a little. You know, I'm doing less ropeless climbing than I used to. But, you know, honestly, it's like you know, at 40 when I discovered paragliding, I was like, oh, I found another sport that was even more dangerous than climbing that I was passionate about. So I think I've gotten better at managing risk over time, and I've become more honest with myself, and my ego's become more detached from things than it was. Obviously, looking back on young Cedar trying to set speed records, you know, and it was really, really close to the edge, and maybe not realizing, like, you know, how serious the repercussions are. I think now I have no doubt, you know, how serious what I'm doing is, and so there's a little more of a real honesty with my risk taking. But I'm just like, I'm inherently, it's just for better or worse, that's who I am, is I find meaning through dangerous things that I've fallen in love with, you know. And so now with paragliding, it's something, you know, it's something that sometimes is really hard to rectify, you know, especially after seeing my wife in a wheelchair and then coming back after that to the sport that I love. And yeah, I mean, you know, it was like a month after Nellie was, you know, in a wheelchair, I was like, oh man, it looks like a good flying day. I think I need to come back to paragliding. And my first day back, I set a new out and back record on the Front Range. I flew the entire Front Range from here all the way to Colorado Springs and back, like 200 kilometers. I landed and I was like, well, I can't quit this, you know what I mean? I was just like, you know, I'm like, is this like being a heroin addict? Maybe, you know, it's a hell of a drug though. And you know, but you know, there's it's not all, there's always that like kind of balance, you know, of trying to be healthy, but also trying to do something that sparks you. So yeah, it's a tricky question.
I'm just wondering, especially the free climbs in the middle of nowhere, how do you get down?
Oh yeah. Well, you know, sometimes you fly down. That's always the best way. But you rappel down, and so on all those climbs, especially that Honnold and I were doing in Antarctica, and it's worth. There's a film called Queen Maudlin that's on my Vimeo channel that you could watch, and you can also see my whole discography on my Vimeo on demand channel. But that particular adventure, we were, descending every single pitch, and we were doing first ascent, so we were just improvising anchors. This would go down, and so yeah, the adventure was, it was really the most dangerous part was the descending on that trip, and yeah, you're making anchors, and then you come down on the rope, and then you pull the rope through. You pray it doesn't get stuck, and then the rope falls down, and then you put it through the next thing, and it's just one rope at a time. So it takes hours to get back down the mountain, and a lot of the risk is there. You could, rock fall, rope getting stuck, anchors. Sometimes the anchors were like, well, this is the best we can do, and the anchors could be like pretty on the edge of it might rip out, and so yeah, it was pretty intense coming down those mountains.
Is that why you got into paragliding?
Well, yeah, initially, yeah. So initially, I got into paragliding because I thought it would just be amazing to fly down from things, and then I got my first thermal. So if you ever see a bird and it's just banked over like this and it's just going in circles going up, that bird is thermaling, and that's what we do in paragliders. And once I got my first thermal, it was like my first hit of crack. You know what I mean? I was just it was just such an amazing experience. And then I realized, oh, not only can I fly down from things, I could fly across 20 different mountains. And so that became this really addictive and just mind-blowing thing, And I feel like looking back on the experiences I've had from that, it's just I've just had so many incredibly mind-blowing experiences, on the edge and just so elemental. So yeah. No, it's too corporate of an event for me.
Is all the filmography on paragliding with drones, or are some of the camera operators flying with you?
Yeah, so a little bit of camera operator flying with you. Drone Insta360 has really changed the game with documenting, especially paragliding, because it gives you that kind of that third-person view. But it's just you can just put a selfie stick, and if you guys are familiar with Insta360s, it basically erases the selfie stick out of the view, so it kind of gives you that third-person view. And then what I found with all this stuff, right? It's amazing footage of all that stuff, but it's really the into camera, the documenting, the storytelling that's going to make something compelling. Yeah. Oh, there's so many. I don't even know. You back there? We'll get. Yeah, so it's we're getting anywhere from 50 to 70 applications during an application round, and then also as the director, I'm also flexible. If I see an opportunity or something that I think is really meaningful, then I can work on the fly. But we're around 5 to 8 different people get funded a year. Actually, this year I've had 2 cars my entire life. I dirtbagged in a Toyota Camry for most of my adult life, and then I upgraded to a 2005 Grand Caravan, and it was I had a bed in the back. I could sleep in my vehicle. I no longer had to pitch a tent or go sleep in a cave. I mean, it was luxurious, right? And I just through the Dirtbag Fund donated that van to a 17-year-old dirtbag climber in Denver who is contributing to the First Ascent community and is just working really hard. And so, yeah, it's also the Dirtbag Fund is, because it's a small and light and fast operation, I can do really fun and kind of very personal things like that, like give my minivan away to this young dirtbag, which I just did a couple weeks ago. So it's very fun, and I'm hoping to scale it out and grow it over time. We've also had this young man went to India and did a big mixed climbing first ascent in the Himalayas with support from the Dirtbag Fund, and then we released a film about it on my YouTube channel. And so we're looking to do more and more stuff like that. And my hope is that long after I'm gone, the Dirtbag Fund is supporting young climbers and celebrating the culture of climbing. Yeah.
A little foreshadowing for our panel later this morning. What does wealth mean to you?
Wealth, to me, is it's having enough money to support your basic needs while having the most amazing experiences you can before you die. I would say that's wealth. Wealth is it's a balance of experience and then enough financial security that you're not like worried about basic needs being met. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with the concept of like there's a certain amount of money before you can't get any happier from money. And so like once you have that amount and then you also have amazing experiences, then you're kind of in that sweet spot, That's my definition of wealth. Yeah. It'd be sweet to have a Billy.
Yeah. I just have a question that's kind of a tail end to the earlier question you asked about risk, and as you've kind of gone through life and how you see it, and it's changed over your life. Do you think a lot of your early success was, what do you attribute it to, and as it pertains to risk, do you think it's because you didn't have maybe as the type of appreciation for it that you do now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when you're young, for whatever reason, I think it's some sort of biological necessity, right? Like when you're young to be able to take risk, and then it's necessary to take risk in life, right? And so definitely probably some of my success came from that like youthful vigor of, of things. But then I think a lot of my success didn't come from as much from risk as it came from creativity and from and self-expression and like not being afraid to be myself, even though myself was sort of like a very untraditional sort of manifestation of personality. So yeah, it's like, what is success, and like, it's different for every person, but it when you feel it, I guess. So that would be, and if you get that feeling in your life, then you're one of the lucky ones. Yep.
How did your relationship with your parents go through all this?
It stayed pretty good. It was tough for my mom especially. They were hippies who conceived me in a school bus, right? So I was like, well, what did you guys expect, But as they, it's like as they matured and my mom became, a school teacher, and then she became the principal of the school, and like there's that achiever side to us, as a family. It was tough to see, and they worked really hard to pay my way through college. I was very lucky to be, to have that support. And, so it was tough for them to see their son move into a Camry and take it to Yosemite. And it was, they were pretty worried. But then now they're so proud, right? I pulled it off, and it was, not everyone does. Some people take their Camry to Yosemite and then, you know what I mean? It's maybe it doesn't spark it for them, and maybe it just doesn't work. I mean, sometimes shit doesn't work out. Not everybody gets to live this amazing fairy tale lifestyle that I have, but nobody gets to live this lifestyle without like going for it and taking the risk, of course, right? And so, but they're very proud, and now, it's like my dad's at a coffee shop being like, oh yeah, my son's a famous rock climber, and like, here, check out his Instagram. You should follow him on Instagram. I'm all, thanks for the follower, Dad. It's like, it's like, yeah, it's been a wild journey for sure. Yeah.
What methods or tools do you have to manage anxiety or fear?
That's a good one. Methods and tools to manage anxiety and fear.
Coming from a Navy SEAL.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. I think the most powerful thing is presence and breathing, and then framing things, and then for me, like really like risk management is all about like perceived versus actual risk, and because so much of like fear that you experience with something like climbing or paragliding is perceived versus actual risk, right? And so, being an expert in any field is being able to parse out when like the fear you're feeling is logical versus illogical. Because if it's logical fear, right, you need to listen to that, because that's how you stay alive, and in one piece. And so for me, it's about awareness and what is really here. And that's kind of how I parse it out. Yeah. And then I think a lot of you probably do that in your professional lives, I'm guessing, or in your personal lives, or in anything, right? You have to manage the risk in everything that you do, really. Driving down the street, you know? Yeah. We good? Well, I really appreciate your guys' time. Yeah. And, yep. Thank you. Yeah.
That's good. Crushed it.